and ascending victim for legal regimes towards the cluster, worst victim without the clutter of agents labor sector means folks having a piece of current and constantly and will seeking life in the active things, structural marketation, shape workers, vulnerability, trust, change factors, dismiss, by dominating trafficking approach, relevant and reproducibility, change charges over increased control over immigration as an account state, that would safeguards against work, continue worker complaints, relevance over here, are restricting the collective action bargaining. Now, third is AIDS, pathologization of prostitution is normalized in discussion of HIV, AIDS being prostitution is understood as vectors for the disease, which erases the real impact of AIDS leading to aggressive enforcement of biased domestic policies that produce worse violence upon prostitutes Irvine in 99% occupying unenviable position in HIV AIDS epidemic, which repressions large and very restricted policy range to overlap and reinforcing the range of trade with these to employ a public health ready for London purpose to the first sexual Irvine underscore reaction characters and reduction behavior sex testing belonging to cancel it the cycle for first risk counseling and restrict realizations because the global public belief the government spreading safety media and relationship and figures tension social cost of illness from the need for the racial policy having happy with HIV human rights based on different targeted prevention strategies containment oriented punitive approach to prostitution HIV peer family application of measures food special foundation and Christian convey social cost being pricing in favor of state interstate statute which can only be enforced likely association for groups of family low social status undermine the meaning of law. Now, pathologization has manifested itself in the savior logic of U.S. anti-prostitution policies increase the Zambian government's use of prostitutes as scapegoats for HIV transmission while doing nothing substantial to stop the disease. Craig on 14. In Zambia, sex work disputed people behind bodies, oversight, punishment, and control. Evicting sexual nature has become colossal national body repression. Repression at a high value line. Zambia takes sex work, position of use funders, reinforce government's moral authority, and to reduce sex work, or reduce safety, in alignment with the position of large funding governments. The clear mention of brothel rates, more and anti-corruption law police. The U.S. government repression of sex work through arrest and police violence and just stimulating sex work, aging public. This repression for the labor of the population, stopping spreading sex work soldiers are directly away from the 2 decades present party that has interest in the activities of the U.S. and Zambian political policy media repressing sex work strategy that produce political and academic value. Collapses the categories of HIV and sex work, which justifies violence against prostitutes in the form of public whipping and verbal attacks. Going 14 authorities can billion sex work, financial scare practice for being dispatched by HIV, the reputation of representation of sex workers as responsible for disease, class, and representation of sex workers, somebody has disease, the sex workers present can control through arrest, detention, deportation, consuring of sex work occupation, public safety, illegitimate consequence, permanently exist outside citizenship, sex workers often European as a regular race, to denounce sex workers, killers of slaves, women under the guise of pregnant, from transgression, the guise of protecting the nation, clothing, the place, sex work with infection informed the very violent nature of many such measures. Now, status quo construction of prostitutes as external threats to the country are based on worst case scenarios to justify the scapegoating of prostitutes as terrible way to form policy making because these types of exaggerated threats become real and framed with such justified framing everybody's in need of the U.S. behavior as Schneider and Ten as works acting as a research expensive smashing expectation reducing loss of possible passes for things bad decision making only have possible facial on extreme parallelism poor job system application law blood use for any positioners out who don't invade rocks on me to new governments who do we stabilize the Middle East and white suggest fear we exaggerate are justified by worst case about its ignorance the case change that's that security institutional confusion paralysis etc. against more transfers than the search of vaccine would seem to be argued to understand culture. There's no point in listing them. Now, solvency, non-stigmatizing legalization is crucial. That's a nice civil corruption, criminalized sex workers access into institutional power and ability to organize a friendship, economic lead to marginalization, your current length of civil rights, crime, and drug trafficking, legal rights, considered parts of new form of work and process that work with tenor rights, protection 3, restricting stigmatizing limitation, or brutalized sex work themselves. Now, regulating facilitators is the only way to stop forced STD testing and break down the vector stereotype of prostitutes that augur in forcing health testing way to store by sex work, but that's little to protect the career considered back to disease must regulate in order to control contagion throughout the city establishments to health codes of the law regulation applied to the establishment not one to extent where sex work can be one of the groups or individuals are subject to range of surveillance control measures while clients are not. Now our regulations are unique and distinct from previous models, which means that all of their empirically failed style arguments are responsive to the after the rights of defend quo in 560 regulation required all businesses specifically the field established by governance boards alarm buttons so locations social security can be lured to drive yourself high standards that apply to any business condoms and all regulation must public post clean beds and showers regulation states have math appropriate time limitation. Now status quo binds within legalized prostitution is the result of specific regulation including licensing and access streams. These produce a two-tiered industry discourse which targets racialized, gendered, and impoverished of the scholar. In 10, prostitution becomes a target for the state sweater on the efforts number 2, responsible life habits to maintain space of the operation of the capital economy licensing existing abstinent operation to normalize particular forms of citizenship and sexuality writing to deviant those who cannot through poverty, race, immigration, health, media, restrict north, extension of class and racial others from gentrifying inner cities and inner cities, integration of clean urban spaces, law display a vital role in authorizing the forms of knowledge helping to shape content, empowering rigorous for agent, access and views, no forms of fantasies for all appears to receive, but it may actually be augmented by greater range of control than previous systems, ensures the wider structure of governmentality, global implementation of hearing to comply with literal objects to state interference and the economic racial segregation apparent appears accidental licensing, operate to encourage subject performance, self-governing, the rational actors provide wider cognitive levels to identify those who cannot order that they mean excluded. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, as long as that gets sent, I can start cross-examination. So, we plan to doesn't say anything specific to transgender prostitutes good for them or important for them.
The argument is that the criminalization of prostitution creates disproportionate research methods whereby people who research prostitutes only look to find the straight cisgender white woman as a prostitute, which then creates that.
Why does criminalization cause that? That seems like
also the first card in the 1AC talks about how sex work has become a sort of survival strategy for trans individuals because they are disproportionately excluded from other ways of making money or just literally surviving because of their identity. We think that the criminalization hurts their ability to access that.
Gotcha. That card actually quotes or cites a quote by Sheila Jeffreys. What was that quote?
Sheila Jeffreys calls gay men the cause of women's subjugation, while male, female, transgendered sex workers are referred to as self-mutilating men. Our argument is that that is an abolitionist standpoint. Legalization would challenge that.
Okay, is that the only abolitionist standpoint, or is abolition also?
Probably not the only one, but Jeffries is a very prominent abolitionist.
Right, you're right. She's a prominent one, and you know that quote was in a book about body modification. My question is abolitionism universally bad?
We think so, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Who's Bridham?
Bridham.
Like, why should we listen to Bridham? How do we know Bridham's right?
On the site, the Bridham, the thing about the criminalization of sex work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. The card is from, I believe it's from,
it's from HIV Plus magazine.
Yeah. We think that, I think this card is also...
I don't need to get too bogged down on that. I have a different question. If you fail to change prevailing norms about prostitutes, do you lose?
No. We think that changing abolitionism in the law stops at least the Thailand argument. We also think that the Thailand argument is separate from a stigma.
So the rescues and repatriation policies in Thailand are carried out by NGOs. How do you solve that?
What?
The funding for those NGOs comes from anti-abolitionist and abolitionist and anti-prostitution policies in the US.
Okay, how do you stop abolitionists from having money if they fund them?
That's also the stigma argument.
Okay,
that seems like that gets back to norms, which you said are key.
The 1AC piece of Kinney evidence definitely says that the justification for things like Thai government crackdowns are in terms of
how do you stop the justifications for Thai government crackdowns if norms are key? These all seem like norms.
It's a legal justification for it, right? We have the legal justification that says globally prostitution shouldn't exist anymore, right?
Okay.
We challenge that.
How do you stop trafficking?
Argument is that's the Thailand argument.
And the Chong card.
The Chong card is what I'm referring to.
Sure, the Chong card and also the earlier piece of Chong evidence talks about how status quo focus on sex work in terms of it being trafficking distracts from us talking about other forms of trafficking, specifically labor. Right, because it allows for us to have a more direct focus on stopping trafficking rather than saying it's all
what do we do?
So more money would be extended to anti-trafficking policies that are laboring because right now. So policies in status quo include things that are raids, which are ineffective, right?
We think
better policies are things that control the way migration works in terms of labor rather than sex.
Gotcha.
5 off, solvency, the advantage.
While you set that stuff up, I'm going to need you to grab me some more paper.
Sorry, I had to put that in.
That's all good.
Did you say it was solvency first? Or?
Yeah. Have extra
It's
paper on.
downloading, so
I need a few more
I
sheets.
should get it. Any way you want to consider moving here, and then I can sit next to you?
Did?
I got it.
I do too.
You should have it all.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay. Does everyone have what they need?
Yeah.
One sec here. I'm good, sorry.
Okay. California climate legislation, PCT, bills RE 325, climate change policy, which pivot momentum around towards the recalibrated climate change policy. New goals are ambitious and contentious to increase electricity source, reduce petroleum use, double energy efficiency, bold and absolutely necessary stopping catastrophic changes. The plan is controversial and drains PC, PEP at 13 years, there's no recent history of legalization and Secondary displays and the combat legalization, political sensitivity makes the reform unlikely. There's been no political will to improve prostitution. Markets, PCK, itself, clean tech leadership, Lieberman. 2-4 Brown is determined to make a climb to signature. She appears determined to keep the pedal on the floor despite the division. Population will only report to point Brown because she couldn't travel most and leadership bring this on Balkan rise, really central California to be unified. And leading the plan containing warming Brown should reinvigorate the solar and wind industries without the Congress of Florida event first result 50% of the game changer. Brown might get propelled to expand the 50% into the panel's park innovation across the electricity sector. Extinction, Claire Boston 9, U.S. has squandered opportunities for global currency. This one can just say the planet for warming while the U.S. maneuver was the hegemon warming by the greatest chance faced by humankind and Nancy Sears, some kind of good merge which turns the American primacy and global stability 6 for increased emissions means more devastating water shortages, fires and storms, accommodation of our energy, dishonor of security, warming will the U.S. can develop new technologies, battery, solar, wind innovation will give the U.S. an edge accommodation for Germany. This will give the U.S. a tremendous room for any leverage that can be applied to keep potential foes in check. The counterplan: the United States should adopt a rehabilitative approach to prostitution, substantially expanding social services to allow exit from prostitution and require that persons arrested for prostitution be diverted to a newly created prostitution courts that offer these services as an alternative to incarceration itself. Stigma and the F. Jacobson 14 problem solving core works to get about their social service converted skills to make a life outside prostitution. At least already the most of us found the current system prostitution versus not in jail legal condos and access services or by police or service catalyst for access service. The core be less adversarial. The model also for access time by allowing them to opt in such would bridge the gap between the victim and criminal labels. Originally by prostitution versus non-victimized. The proposed model recognize that all participants need to be accountable. They also need help. Law enforcement services, a first responder for prostituted youth and separate victims for third party exploitation to allow prosecution and pimps that kind of unsolved trafficking. Jacob 14 law enforcement has the ability to physically locate victims. Operation 30 exploiters can offer access service officers the first responder role or other organizations told us only when victims are detained that they have a chance to receive help and a card to find out breaking free a program that ultimately prostitution in order that's already criminalized women lose a valuable intervention point because pimps can keep reselling women and make more money. They must be prosecuted, otherwise they will find another women or child to exploit. The separation is essential. Next counterplan. The United States should remove penalties on prostitutes, but enforce penalties targeted at customers of prostitutes, requiring that customers convicted of nonviolent prostitution charges enter education or rehabilitative programs instead of incarceration. Expand social services, including but not limited HIV/AIDS treatment options for all prostitutes. Roll out voluntary exit from prostitution. Ban forced rescue of prostitutes. Train relevant law enforcement personnel to implement these changes. Proposed the counterplan in international fora is a viable way to reduce sex trafficking. The counterplan decreases prostitution and trafficking through demand reduction. It's the best way to address violence as well as patriarchal norms. Curb while increasing prostitution and penalties between this approach to arbitrary humans because they are low side investment more everyone demand. So it may be a model for state legislation only punishes consumers and e-commerce that provide, but also assist in listing to escape about demand of prostitution without floors, legalization or ultimate normalization of sexual violence and elimination of symbols regulation when the control one class women 2 years following the law. There was a 50% decrease in the number of prostitutes and 70% decrease in the number of size testimony from good considerations to impact on trafficking for buyers who are getting arrested. Increased difficult for research confirms that penalizing purchasing is the number one deterrent because of the fear of detection. Operation is expensive, giving less time to buy fewer buyers inconvenience and fear of it affect buyers or traffickers. The law rejects men's self right to buy and question the idea that men should be able to express their sexuality form at any time. Prostitution affects all women. Swedish law takes a strong stance against the idea that men have the right to find to be sexually exploited. Only the counterplan solves global sex trafficking again, and AIDS sex trafficking is an example of capitalism as a remedy by legal restriction. The trade will be regulated on by market force of growth and results in trafficking. Efforts that solely address supply the ineffective stuff that global abuse is but eradicating sex trafficking the most effective way as a demand strategy. The first of its abolitionist law similar to stimulus approaches and rigorous enforcing is trying to control legalization and fill policy. Now one should consider Vietnam serve to stimulate rapid growth in the industry. Domestic increased demand for subject sex trafficking conversion on schools of rebuild promoting results graduates have citizen about 1% of last year's funds initiated and lead a global effort to combat sex trafficking through demand measured as a global commitment to eradicate sex trafficking. The trafficking disad legalization increases it. It turns the case curve all legalization institutions to the illegal industry usually regarding the benefit of testosterone and all results in increasing in prostitution. Despite regulation violence for one, they're told to keep fund pounds and assault on norms of prostitution were legal or legal. The MSC has many concerned the property of prostitute from Nevada, so the fraudulent are worse than any time the imprison women are protected by the same leaders. So makes it more visible, more can be controlled, and more violent life trafficking increase for prostitution. And most in Germany have the highest numbers increase in male buyers, increase in which is not the trafficking rates of child prostitution and trafficking popular sharp high rates of child prostitution and trafficking in Nevada prostitution will legal prostitution benefits the state above all else. Cross-national data proves show in 13 the scale effects legal leads are trafficking while the subject effects which is demand for trafficking prostitutes for trafficking legal residents are quantitative empirical and also 150 countries with the scale effects having the substitution of countries with legal prostitution experience larger trafficking influence. One central finding is based on the most reliable data. Trafficking is a system of slavery and structural violence. Victim testimony George 12. consistent struggles with the role of sex trafficking and head of the real law many public fighting against modern slavery. The new abolitionist movement, these goals would be to dismantle system to end the system will significantly decrease the number of governments upon challenge agrees that the wheel trafficking. This is great. I'll tell around more victims. Letter recalls how long she living times ranked young people need to know that they are not alone. That outweighs claims of empowerment. Hunt and 13 individual who purchased another form of sexual gratification and chilling energy that applying to not only just sellers but also decides it's holding to attract the traffickers being navigated for illicit sex and perpetuates an unjust society. While some sex workers say they are fully choosing to sell, solid public policies not built around a small number of exceptions given the great times of the majority that cannot be space where legalization increases the number exploited. The Neolib K. Legalization relies on a contractual paradigm of disembodied agency that posits individuals as free to buy and sell whatever they choose in the market. The illusion of individual choice prevents collective resistance against market commodification. Miriam and 5. The individual's free to trade capacity of running the several public profession match that a person must interact from ourselves. The real transaction is but alienation with the workers already his or her honey. A real transaction is defined by the workers being to be subordinate to the central commission of prostitution exchanges. This word that the prostitution firm was all sexual services or exist at a subject demands of a scale separating our sexual capacity from ourselves. What is released on prostitution relation like plan the prostitute health commander of our part of this fundamental relation of body is mystified by free prostitution. The candidates events of theories of prostitution is the form of labor or regulated sex industry based the question whether regulated sex and when is better than not the category of sex workers when a contractual model agency conceals domination distinction between coerced and free prostitution events and applying spice of relation and undergirding prostitution when it's so made less how sexual and appropriated by John's the model picture of the disembodied prostitution subject and the standard a relation to a body single capacity can object the claim for sex workers sexually predisposed the perpetrator and again abstract sexual NGOs or service are the paradigm of disembodied agency. Woman who makes real choice in many cases with the answer prostitution and contesting a fantasy of free prostitution and scream source and mystify the actual condition of the term the economic option is man's man that makes prostitution an intelligently and a legitimate extinction. Non-J7 inequalities bring no choice multiplied economic activities that link to scarcity, temperature, soil, land, water, forest, interface with the world of extinction, purpose of weather, general world domination, and connected nuclear weapons, people afflicted with poverty and extinction of species are increasing at such a rate that biosphere is under threat. Alternative rejects contractual agency in favor of collective challenge and neoliberal governance. Miriam and 5 down groups of men access to bodies and gender people leave ML power than for and sexually intelligent governments are completely conceive of sexualism and contract model. This involves recognition of victimization and China and losing the pro-sexual organizations. Men's right to be sexually serviced as remains in those because male powers and such as domination and only intelligence scores support the abolition position that prostitutes women or victims does not want the activities are saying women have also employed numerous strategies of resistance. The question is how the sex worker base. The question is what this meaning of aging when these terms are defined as activists and negotiating in this situation is uptaking regardless and that was only when we radically interrogate the meaning of power more than we can see what power truth founders must be expanded theories in terms of women's collective political agency. This test requires an understanding that freedom is not negotiated within a situation task is enough but rather capacity to radically transform the situation itself. Solvency and legalization doesn't change social things post intent except in this immense control sex work and institution of prostitution way different men from everything innocent women seems girlfriends just for using prostitution of the form of time against women some women can be raped others can not prostitution can be rape some sex legal prostitution false male unconditional access and turns women to second class as consummates police and governments are perpetrators of violence where legal women suffer from these injuries repression of the state research committees where prostitution legalized proves it does not eliminate violence or trafficking but aspects of good prostitution crimes and degradation in general regulating facilitators just
move on to the advantage.
The advantage, legalization of state-sanctioned gender violence. Melissa and 13 states that allow legalized prostitution, general legalization affects this as well as prostitution harms male violence against women, legalized prostitution, harassing the interest around there, dealing with degradation with women and children. Any men are being killed or exposed to not need new research with the need for sexual exploitation and the need prostitution to be abolished. The impact is widespread victimization and global gender violence turns or change gender arguments. Farley and 13, far from living prostitution looks in this sex and embraces the role of the dominance of sexual person, semi-prostitution, course, or rape culture, normalized the conduct of victim with sex and waves, victim for the victimization, the global finding of one nation are more likely to be killed by male violence from cancer, malaria, trafficking, accident, more common, only makes sense when our side of culture, accept prostitution, commodified violence, which is about evasion of all your body orifice on a daily basis. 2/3 men and the transgender prostitution men diagnosed with PTSD. This is suffered by the most emotionally traumatized people ever studied by psychology. Legalization drastically increases the illegal market. McKinnon, 11 prostitution legalization goes through the roof. This has been documented progress on legal prostitution explosion and legalization of authorities pursue harm reduction. Legal brothers require restriction that's raised the price on sex without condoms illegal. Demand satisfied with legal industry that swings up when belts or lighters have to be confiscated at the door. Johns go elsewhere. German government who legalizing tells us legal market exposed the government apparatus to address the world. One of the stigma says the same at the meantime. The legal system tells society this is how the world for you is.
What's the status that you counterpoint in the K?
The status quo is always a logical option.
Net benefits?
I'm going to let Ellis deal with that one.
Okay, so the first counterplan, the net benefits are politics and the trafficking DA.
Mm-hmm.
For the second counterplan, the net benefits are just the trafficking DA and Neolib, and the case turns are net benefits to both.
Okay, your Brown disadvantage, I guess Democratic senators have proposed and are pushing the climate initiatives that Brown wants. Why does that prove that PC is key?
Why does it prove that PC's key? Because there's Democratic holdouts, moderate Dems, as well as Republicans within California that Brown has to.
Right. Why wouldn't other Democrats pushing for the bills be sufficient?
Why isn't that sufficient? Because there's not enough of them, and they need Republican support in the legislature to get it through.
Which piece of evidence do you think makes that claim?
The third piece of evidence in the one in Seychelles speaks to the efficacy of Brown's push and says that continued push.
Right, it says that Brown's push would be good, but it doesn't say that that the bills don't get passed without it.
The first piece
what kind of reverse causal claim do you think?
I think the Lieberman evidence is reverse causal because it says that Brown quote has to keep the pedal to the floor, and the first piece of uniqueness evidence says that it's a contentious fight now, and it's only 50-50 as to whether or not it will pass, which proves the efficacy and necessity of political capital.
Okay, your first counter plan, I guess, if it why do you think this resolves high carceral crackdowns on prostitutes?
Question for Ellis.
I'm sorry, what was the...
The first counter plan, why does it solve high crackdown on prostitutes?
Because it changes the way U.S. enforces things, which means if Thailand cares about the U.S., they would model it.
Where do you think this is? The argument is that when the U.S. takes a prohibitionist or an abolitionist stance towards prostitution, that justifies Thailand cracking down on prostitutes. Both of the counter plans are still abolitionist rhetoric, right? Which means that it should still cause Thailand to crack down on prostitutes.
The argument is that you're an oversimplification of what constitutes abolitionism, and that the counterplan reforms are...
Okay, what constitutes abolitionism in terms of the counterplan?
So abolitionism is a goal of reducing prostitution. There are many ways of doing it. Some of them advocate punitive measures like arrests. Some of them advocate social services, but you can't lump all those things together.
And a shift away from the punitive model, we would say, is sufficient to access the act.
Okay, criticism, does the alternative legalize prostitution?
No.
Okay, so in response to neoliberalism, you think that prostitutes should still be put in jail?
Prostitutes shouldn't be in jail. That's a false choice.
What? Can you explain that?
We shouldn't put prostitutes in jail.
Okay, so the alternative decrims prostitution?
The alternative isn't a counterplan. We say the way you research and understood the problem is flawed, and that if you understand prostitution...
That doesn't answer my question. Are prostitutes still in jail after the alternative?
You're saying, like, how does
a false choice.
Like, the
That's not answering. It's a yes-no question.
You've posed this as a question of either or. Our argument is we need to ask what the third option is, which the alternative opens up space for that dialogue.
What if people don't have that third option, though? Like, what if people don't have the third option of, like, what if people have to participate in prostitution?
We should give this intellectual space to create that third option, and
ignore that some people don't have it.
No,
yes.
not at all.
I'm going to chat you some stuff after.
Yeah, of course.
I'm good.
4, is that right?
Oh, wait, 1 second. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Right.
731.
Who's everybody?
Everyone.
Everyone.
Fair war. Peaceful. Chaos, Betty King's HR.
It just said. Do you also mind if I use your stand?
Go for it.
Thanks. It's going to be Solvency, the advantage, Trafficking, Brown, the criticism, the...
So that will be-
Sorry, my bad.
Trafficking, politics.
Yep. Neolib, the exit strategies counterplan, and then Sweden. So can I move the microphone? I don't want to break it or hurt it. There's a microphone. I didn't know if it needed to be there.
It's an on thing.
You say it's a non-thing?
In this round, climb wall. I'm disappointed that this inherency argument isn't taking hold of the debate.
What's the inherency arc?
Quantum physics means that there's no
Change possible. Usage
change.
change states.
Inherency requires change.
States all in.
But
This sounds like Loyola.
No, this is like bad copy of a copy of a copy of Loyola.
Sid, Will, and Joe.
No, that's bad copy of a copy of most.
Alright,
Just kidding, people on stream.
Sorry. All right. Sorry to derail. I'm ready when you are.
You're not streaming it though, right? You're just recording it.
No stream.
Oh, okay.
Post is actually a copy of a copy of KM.
Damn right. Okay.
Okay.
What copy?
Just kidding, people on stream.
I'm done now.
You need any more disclaimers there?
Two arguments that control debate. First, the abolitionist discourse is verbal violence, naturally evidence doesn't identify, vilify, pimps, focus only, victimize females, and inherently vile occupation, the impact is justification, constant rape, exploitation, unverified research, models of erasure of queer, trans, or male bodies, naturally evidence says this language must be challenged to reveal their hateful language and false data amount regulations. Every model of status quo regulation controls prostitute bodies, which is why legalization fails and it does not apply. Only still announcing behind the regulations open up a narrow abolitionist understanding sex with a status quo said regulating facilitators creates a better research framework consults exploitation and balance that means the majority of their case and case arguments not apply for Solvency. This abolitionist argument indicates that only solving stigma and open up in research models allows for prostitution to be a survival strategy specifically for trans individuals and also individuals in Thailand who are doing this as a form of economic reconciliation. Reconciliation means we are already always a challenge against neoliberalism, also not a reason as to why the act is a bad idea because it's definitely better than status quo. The advantage now the first two parts are abolitionist arguments. Indicates that prostitution is always a form of violence. We are not. Prostitution is not a form of rape culture. It's a survival strategy for individuals who do not have access to normal strategies. The last argument is a question of legal markets. Because one of Chong evidence indicates that the focus on sex work specifically is what creates the illegal markets. Also, the Snowden evidence indicates that patchwork laws will create issues with trafficking. The status will go to the abolitionist stances are destroying you and trafficking protocols. Now, this is Chong evidence internally turns all their unions because those the only successful with the help of the UN continued abolitionist stances will destroy trafficking. Abolitionists run code-side trafficking policies which led to violent carceral state that leads to cycles of rape and rescues until they are sexually moral. The only side female pain which always crosses over trans sex workers and ignores the similar violence of trans people who are trafficked or ignores the trans violence that's happening constantly. That's the great evidence. You should hold their toe and their statistics skeptical. This is White Shirt 14 human trafficking generation misspelled attention like discourse black items based because of high quality research been done scholarly publications 30 the journal of literature literature have descended such a extreme that policymakers and law enforcement about sexual exploitation were all details of sexual abuse, silent labor, trafficking, labor gets found, fraudulent course, circumstances, quiet, hard, you need to space, status quo is failing, now there's no money or no oversight, Anderson, 9, 4, team measure for trafficking, trafficking, shoot out, transit, trafficking, hard trafficking, people according to global lines against trafficking, and women lack of oversight, makes the impact, our 2 value governments, international organization refuse to make information available, money reaches trafficked person, trafficking is common, in construction, manufacturing, mining, forestry, fishing, domestic, servitude, lack of common definitions mean that all of your studies suck. This calendar and 12 of the media, one of the main impediments to effective foundations, last specifying communicated common vision, trafficking, the absence of the unified vision, exasperate confrontations, multiple stakeholders in the realm of the bureau, verifying one data, lack of overarching vision, loss of harmony, intervention, flourishing, good work to go and recognize, go to Brown case, always U.S. anti-prostitution policies create the condition of economic military intervention to say, tie process from the more business sector all the while, forcing the magnet poverty, ignoring their wants and their needs, and their internally series mess of type of policy making or Schneider evidence criticized because the right relies on faulty prediction based prediction based logic on false things like the election predictions literally change every day, which means we have a substantial education dissent to their argument. Also, your dissatisfaction the bill is not written and future changes could happen, which gets the bill and also links to the Schneider argument from above Lawson in 2015 California Climate Leadership Package includes 4 separate pieces of legislation. All 4 bills are currently pending in the Senate committee. Will complete their work on these 4 bills by the end of 2015 with initial consideration to occur in June 2015, the last day for each House passed bills in this year. September, making this significant work on and amendments to these bills will occur throughout the summer and stop swarming. This is Resolution 313 about formally pledging United States and pledge to GHG emissions by 28% of the next. Deputy the commitment to powerful message to the world together. We can climate change on new regulation that we're putting in place to help the United States should complain that it's concerning responsibility to tackle the climate. The target is part of the collective effort to transition to a low carbon global economy. The United States pledge to combine China's target to seeing its mission peace. I mean the planet 3 largest carbon polluters are committed to taking action on climate change. I think it won't seem impossible and no impact on Rebuttal 14. The IPC reports that the available conflict models that currently predict active extinction, the risk of extinction, lack of data, added to the doubts of mass extinction. IPC gives no concrete data, property numbers, so lack of basic data, that makes it possible for there to be any hard evidence. Go to Neoliberal. The criticism sacrifice prostitutes who need neoliberalism reifies the academic ignorance of those individuals who do not have the option of the third option that they were talking about. Cross-sector Leo and the abolitionist rhetoric uses neoliberal launches violence against sex workers. Yeah, challenge that justifies the permutation move. Can also regulate facilitated and have a collective challenge to neoliberal governance. Rappel and 12 by question Murphy's decision of an abstraction of neoliberalism over the practice of neoliberalization. Abolitionist policy is going to make sure revenge reaction against the poor, like sex workers for the harms done by neoliberalization. Legalization of poor Murphy's mimics neoliberalism. Policy putting sex workers themselves along with the harms of white capital is not a job until something to address the effects of neoliberalization of the sex workers' daily lives the last between the civil violence policymakers and the other violence of anti-prostitution vigilantes and predators and meanwhile sex workers left to protect themselves all while without material support from feminists and normalized prostitution is better with contracts quo in 5 attractive women protective women who opt to work with prostitute rather than working in straight jobs. So women experience a greater sense of violation because of the corresponding dependence on men and prostitution. Male domination are affirmed in other ways not appear to be reason to pursue sex actions worse than other kinds of action. Subordination and prostitution may be preferable to other areas. The economic independence through non-abuse of prostitution may outweigh the subordination when in prostitution market prostitution and neoliberalism was inevitable. This particle in attempting to conclude neoliberalism for all the course of crisis. This would be erased with striking features of the neoliberalism transformative capacity potential of neoliberalism is underestimated by Jeff or Stalin is exactly neoliberal systems have capacity to constitute political change and institutional reform in multifaceted ways. Local alternatives are vulnerable to this market and the marketized environment to social undercutting institutional overload and regulatory depth and commerce strategies will be objective opponents of neoliberalism must include the reform of macro institutional priorities. The Schneider evidence of critiques their distinction scenario. We have to have an actual scenario that links to causes the extinction. You always undercut and gloss over the prostitutes and status quo to go to the first counterplan. The United States should remove criminal prohibitions directly facilitate and adopt a rehabilitative approach to prostitution to expand social services to prostitutes require that person the rest for prostitution be diverted to newly created prostitution courts and offer these services as an alternative to incarceration. Extend the scale evidence. This is a 2-tier model where there are patchwork regulation. This will increases trafficking, increases bonds because it's play for there will always be an underground market because some things are legal, some things are not. This is this means it cannot solve the trafficking epidemic and exit strategies fail anyways. This Ray and 10th this includes extra extract the law from the sex workers' circumstances which they live, make acts unrealistic in these programs that are designed to rescue and protect sex workers. Don't consider the well-being of programs that aim to get sex workers out to do little to reduce the violence and improve the health and working conditions in that. Of those 375 arrested workers charged with rehabilitation ever being charged, but only 21 of those went through the program, have left the business strong for sex worker rights is at the intersection of those strong for economic justice and bodily rights in Sweden. Doesn't solve stigma. This is Crouching 15. The stigma against prostitution remains difficult for women to help from police striking the fear of the law is forcing women who sell sex into more dangerous situations, leading women to jump to the car for shaking and the driver shouldn't hide or threatening the law to increase stigma and discrimination, putting women who sell sex in even more precarious positions. People selling sex report they find it difficult to find social services that will help unless they stop selling. That's an answer to the social services part. Sorry, Sweden. Permutation, remove penalties, and regulate facilities, and expand social services, include the downloaded HIV and AIDS treatment possible for prostitutes and be enforced rescue prostitution, and train relevant law officials for enforcement personnel to implement these changes, and propose the counterplan and international forum available for way to reduce sex trafficking, extend the Scalar two-tail argument that I made from the second counterplan. Also, this counterplan is abolitionist links to Patriarchy evidence because it indicates that prostitution should eventually not exist, which is the whole purpose of Sweden. Ask yourself what other job has a criminalization against the buyers of that job now. Only leads more trafficking. K and 15 the bill. 3 the C36 criminalizes the purchase and non-facility sexual services. There is a restriction the access and communication of public for prostitution. The result is places sharing space sex workers remote unsafe areas to find. So clients made by Maywood police detection is legal to buy sex workers. Says sex worker any of the restrictions are advertising limited sex workers' ability to screen out clients. Negotiate this was entirely when we don't want to make life safe for the prostitute. We want to draw. We want to do away with prostitution. They want new measures. Lives unlikely to succeed. Mark and succeed. Now the last plank is an international forum argument that abolitionists control the international conversation right now, which is what the Zambia and Thailand argument. If you do not legalize first and challenge abolitionists, they will only take the argument. Also, this links to trafficking, which is the first argument because it creates a two-tier argument, which is the Scalar evidence. Yeah.
We'll take a second to prep.
Okay.
We've got 9:46.
So the first question is one Ellis wanted to ask. What is the two-tier argument?
The showed piece of evidence from the 1AC talks about how the patchwork regulation of prostitution, where one part is legal and one part is not legal, allows for there to be underground and above ground prostitution, where we only focus on above ground prostitution. We ignore the fact that
so we
underground
focus on
prostitution,
above ground to the expense of underground prostitution.
Right, which leads to more trafficking.
Okay.
It's a trafficking argument.
I'm sorry, you mentioned Shoden. Which Shoden?
Email
Oh, okay.
Okay. Abolitionist discourse is bad. What about those who are from non-dominant gender, groupings that believe in abolitionist feminism? Why is that discourse violent?
We still think that abolition, is that an argument as to why, a woman can't be against other women? That's silly, right? Yes, if they use abolitionist rhetoric that's against other sex workers, then yes, it's
how
bad.
can you make the universalizing claim that all of that rhetoric is bad without differentiating between the types of abolitionist rhetoric?
I think I applied it specifically to the Swedish model, which is an idea that prostitution should not exist. All your case cards talk about how prostitution is rape culture, how it's always violent. Those are examples of abolitionists.
But why it's universally the case that such rhetoric is violent? Is there no instance in which it might be a little bit less violent?
If you talk about, in terms of talking about abolitionism, right? If you talk about how abolitionism, yes, prostitution is probably a forced choice in a lot of instances, and how it can create violence, then that's fine. But abolitionism have the instinct of saying, but it should not exist, and that's problematic because it erases individuals who need it.
What is the implication of discourse for the three judges' ballots?
We think that the Bonacci evidence indicates that challenging abolitionism, it needs to happen every time, right? Status quo understandings allows for abolition.
Is that connected to the legal strategy of the app?
We think that the app is
a good idea?
We think it's a reason the app is a good idea, but we also think it's linked to legalization, right? Because that's the only
Weitzer
concrete way
and
to challenge
Gallagher evidence
abolitionists.
you read just say that studies underestimate things when approaching human trafficking.
Yeah.
Why does this matter, given that you haven't presented an alternative study that?
Sure. For instance, the Weitzer card's talking about studies like your Cho article, your Cho.
I guess why does that mean that every portion of the study is wrong?
Because Cho, which is in the context of the Gallagher evidence, Cho indicates trafficking in 125 different countries that all have different trafficking definitions. It's a conglomeration of data from those countries. She never actually did a method.
That suggests the opposite may be true.
Sure, there are different data sources that might be statistically rigorous.
Which evidence have you
Reitzer and Gallagher indicate that it becomes a question of having cohesive frameworks of one definition of trafficking, which status quo questions.
Where do you think Weitzer or Gallagher suggest that the opposite is even possibly true, when all they're saying is that there are some methodological flaws?
I guess I don't understand the question.
Okay, last question. K on the Swedish model is about Bill C-36.
Yeah.
Why is that applicable to different data sets about the Swedish model?
Sure.
And
That
what's
is
done?
talking about. It's doing a study of the Swedish model, and that bill is a
It's
application
a news
of
article
Swedish.
about Bill
No,
C-36.
C-36 being applied to another area is because that bill is based on Sweden, and also the K part.
So before I start the timer again, maybe I'm just missing the email, but I don't think I have that extra one I see card. the Swedish model counterplan, and then solvency and the advantage.
The court CP and Swedish model solvency and advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
just
sorry.
going to try to shift this over. Perfect. Okay.
Can you give me 1 second?
Yes.
Just like smush my fingers into the wall. I think I'll survive. I'm good.
We're not going for the court's counterplan. They've considered these the conditionality, which means they have to win the absent and status quo, and we can kick things that we want to kick the ray evidence that's to apply. It's about the existing exit strategy in the context of criminalization, like specific rescue operations in sub-Saharan Africa that have nothing to do with the counterplan. We're extending their crouch evidence, has no data whatsoever, which means it's completely unfalsifiable and doesn't meet the standard that they have identified for their own advantage. It'll also be answered on the Swedish model debate proper. That is where I am now. At the top, the first argument is the permutation. It makes no sense. The perm still legalizes prostitution. Other places don't make sense because they assume John's being arrested for purchase. No matter what, they link to all of our net benefits about increasing demand and allowing purchase, excluding the first few planks of the counterplan just means that their perm do the plan plus some services, but the services don't make sense in the absence of a demand reduction policy because they'd be redundant with the absent mechanism. Means it's just a question of our offense on case, and in the one in our, it's mutually exclusive anyway. Our offense outweighs Banasky 11. The U.S. must prioritize the sex workers, prostitute people, prioritizing growth, negates government's political responsibility, prioritizing sex workers, complicates helping they cannot escape partially occur, places victims before sex workers, the human right, forgot the privilege of choosing one's occupation demand, contributes to the harm, and legalization fuels demand and rights-setting enforcement efforts that they reform response 14. A choice must be made. Legalized prostitution cannot coexist with efforts to manage copies, and drug lab ensures that commercial prostitution fuels demand where legal difficulty sits up and keeps sexual set, not that limited to victims' sentiments, but it purchases and criminalized not only would demand overseas, but the war against offenders would also be found. That choice has to be made between prostitution as an occupation and trying to seriously eradicate trafficking. Now, I'm going to make all of our top-level solvency arguments here, so make some space for framing issue. You should ignore all 2AC arguments that fail to answer the totality of the counterplan, which is all of them. We don't just decriminalize the prostitute, we also change the punitive model of incarceration and promote social services for prostitutes who want to exit in education and then rehab of clients. Yen says that leads to recidivism rates of less than 1%, promoting a globally resolved spillover to other nations and ensures an international effort. It also guarantees HIV treatment options for prostitutes regardless of gender status and advances the forced rescues and repatriations underlying their Thailand impact, which would certainly be modeled. This is crucial because their best offense is a categorical insight of abolitionism that doesn't apply to our strategy. Abolition is a broad movement with diverse stakeholders, and in no way does it require stigmatizing prostitutes or discriminating against them, but our offense is intrinsic to legalization, so it only goes one way. Another key concession in 1AC Cross is they say norms aren't necessarily key, but all of their solvency claims require a shift in norms. None of the benefits for transgender HIV prostitutes or childline policy are about legalization. They're about any criminalization, and for them to solve things like repatriation, they have to win that broader cultural shift. Also, you should prefer out globally. One is empirical evidence says they cut street prostitution by 50% and male demand by 75% in Sweden. Impractical for trafficking, that's Kerber, who also said it changed culture in favor of gender equality. Two, it's backed by telephone interceptions of traffickers. Waltman 11 and 95, 33,000 prostitute women in Sweden. 2008, women, the sexual virtually decreased 80% by rumors of hidden prostitution. No empirical evidence suggests that it's actually occurred. Then NTID telephone interceptions show the traffickers then played subjects belonging to the brothels are fairly small enterprises. 3, multiple data sets and cross-national comparisons establish causality. Katzen to 10. Eckberg is interviewed police and living special prostitution is not by 50% of the bias decreased by 80%. No boys never get prostitution is illegal. 78 in Denmark has only half the population. Eckberg also referred to police report in the next explosion University of Gothenburg arguing that people selling on the internet is not crazy. Like other countries, the KCC informed the council link from the States are reduced out trafficking. That no traffickers consider the legal rules that legitimate testimonies have shown traffickers prefer countries where prostitution is legalized. For their claims are ideology, not data. On balance, for best because demand is key to any balance. Underground trains are false. Stowe and Howland 13. Evaluation to consist of various experts with field make illusions that allows the Portugal British prostitution has been the most effective for traffickers. There are fewer men buying sex. This has led to increased awareness that buying sex is wrong despite the propaganda of the lobbies. There are no signs of prostitution. Balance against prostitution is increased. Their prostitutes is being worse in living conditions. They are now able to report that customers now become more difficult for social services. Unlike other countries, their trends when it's increased. There's no evidence of having moved to different areas. There is nothing to suggest the market has moved underground. They data that people that lies not better on bad sexuality. They are incapable of showing where and it's such use to question the motivation. However, unattended the Porto data social violence has been reduced. Reporters still explicitly states the reason prostitutes are displaced is having fewer customers. They didn't make a permutation to the counterplan argument, so I don't need to answer that. No new one-hour characterization of what the permutation entails. Now, the next set of arguments are the patriarchy-related ones. We access their broader patriarchy arguments better. That is our curve of evidence on social norms, and yet on the international effect will also when prostitution is key to male domination. So the counterplan is key to challenge patriarchy writ large. Show in Howland 13. Sweden's become less attractive to organized country prostitution to 50% fewer men now by sex dances that increased awareness that buying sex sex is wrong. We are fighting the patriarchal system and ban child the prevailing order. The model is based on human rights and the knowledge that prostitution is violence, and their index don't apply. You should have a high standard for this because the one AC card they cite is about a very specific quote from Jeffries about body modification, which we can agree is bad, but in no way does that discredit every other abolitionist argument, including by Jeffries herself and the act of passing the counterplaint is key to change male culture. Empirics Wall 111. The act of passing the law changed public 96, only 20% believe the word favor criminalized no sex virtue, no way 70% of when the good favor allowed the method is repeatedly been proven a reliable number of scientific reviews circumstances highlight the strong concern effective and conviction rates have not been staggering. And even if Swedish model or abolition in the abstract doesn't change stigma, that's not the counterplaint. It offers services for voluntary exit, provides a non-carceral alternatives for customers, and restrains police nationally. It's far more radical than any app card assumes and goes in the opposite direction of the hate speech that they selectively identify. They're also wrong on stigma. In no way do we vilify or victimize prostitutes themselves. This is warrantless assertion. McKay 13. Our feminist stigmatizing people know patriarchal society attaches stigma patriarchy. There's an transgender woman is only an object in the social woman nature. Women in prostitution bear the brunt of this. It's not a culture of feminist women. It's not think being in prostitution to be the same one who are stigmatizing black and modifying another human being. And we saw better the benefits of demand reduction outweigh longer term Sweden. 80% senators will support the law significantly reduce prostitution more criminals go. Non-sex money against significantly charged laws. Brown kind of stigma the bias and the prostitution stigma. It's not going to go down over the interface organized that are often. If all because they lack the ability to move into receiving some movement towards the critics recognize prostitution is secular the movement reduction mean that fewer are subject to violence. Now the last argument is the underground shift argument. First is Snow and Howland answers that it's utterly devoid of data and outweighed by the prevention effect. Their sources recanted in the attorney's basis speculation. Wall 11 on trying to rumors that circulate about human prostitution. None of the reports are 1 2 years. The logic effect day before and after as well as other countries. And Delaware Washington's plans are incorrect. Now demands for outside sex and dollar purchases according to the words of many are not. Dollar critics were excluded. Scholars have referred to screen fees without knowing the selection bias. The latest inquiry report establishes that their claims are basis. Also, violent jobs exist now. This can't be offense for them. It means that only demand reduction is capable of solving it. Now, the last argument is the next argument is the international forest of we end all penalties on prostitutes. So it obviously changes the international discussion. It's not just advocating abolition in the abstract, the trafficking argument, and the violent will be in the one and are the two-tier argument is just illegal versus legal industry, which the case turn answers. It's also no patchwork because we feel it nationally. Their scholar card is definitely negative. A subordinate it cites the Netherlands as the example. B subordinate says about responsibilizing prostitution through citizenship and licensing, which only they do. Now this Solvency page at the top group, the no social change argument. The act exacerbates the Madonna Horde dichotomy extent. She's a human rights attorney with 30 years of experience on gender violence, so she's light years more qualified to predict the actual results. Stigma becomes justified by legalization, and women are still categorized as innocent or disposable in an unequal regime. This is backed by research in all communities where prostitution has actually been legalized. Don't assume that they have the magic bullet. Non-criminal laws block it. Cohen 9, even if sex work were legalized, there's so many of the legal codes which can target sex workers given the culture believes legalization will not eliminate the stigma change, and the code will not guarantee access to services that women want. Also, stigma comes from male supremacy, so we're a prereq Melissa 13. Prostitution requires politically constructed male desire. The stigma is about the relation given to stigma. It's not by making prostitution more acceptable and abolishing the males supremacy. They say regulation solved. No, it doesn't. Amendment 13, legalization, legal criminal elements out of regulations about the real government, Australia, since legalization, and legal cycle levels, involved the triple, if you New South Wales, the Brown Board, criminalized with the number, triple the majority having no license. New Zealand model fails. That answers their 1AC. Authors Swedish models better cop than 11 cities. New Zealand showed the violence strategy. Legalization does not erase the stigma. Legalization movement board protections for children does not reduce rape and increase the prevalence of both illegal and illegal women. Abolish over the findings of reverse. Abolish and change public attitudes support for us. Legalizing purchasers. Now the arguments about abolitionist language will be answered in the 1 and R. Now the harms page. Extend our patriarchy, net benefit. Melissa and Farley makes a broader structural argument about the effect of legalizing and how it functions by discrediting the possibility of abolitionism, which blocks the male supremacy and causes massive increase in the death of women globally. Even if the counterplay doesn't get rid of patriarchy, it's a DA to legalization. Analogizing sex work to other work also assumes sex violence is the same as other violence, which neglects the reality of gender violence. BK 13. What is wrong with defining prostitution as work like any other? This argument asks what a choice can and if it's really happened to what by inequality and nationalization of wealth and power. Some say from district groups arguing the workers of the living this way. Remove gender analysis. Prostitution is wrong because prostitution is in the vast majority of women. The vast majority of buyers are men. The sense cannot be overlooked. The feminist arguments hold that there is a difference between liberating something with access. One body gets reproduced by liberty. The body is not good itself. There's a difference between being punched in the face and being rubbed because blood is a violation of bodily integrity. All their arguments are based on free choice, which promotes victim blaming and locks in patriarchy. This evidence destroys their grant evidence. Feedback 13. Grant claims that patriarchy is not source oppression. Nothing's not promoting the liberation of individual women. Now female state culture of desegregation is done like it's a war against women. After all, women now make the choice and it's not to be the left to otherwise to right free choice under capitalist to make all sorts of room for privilege against the sex trade. Women who choose sex worker empowerment and the extreme minority groups are not just dangerous because they blame women for their own oppression either as sex angry negative feminists or individuals who make bad choices that they shift the blame away from male domination, trump the experience of view, and choices and illusion manufactured by liberal mythos for the vast majority is coerced. Farley 13. The implications that she chose prostitution needs may be true for 1%, but not reflect around the most prostitutes 1% choose for because of their ethnicity and class. They have escape options. Research and countries don't they do not present prostitution outside of the no means of escape. Another state 996 wanted to escape the agency of prostitution survivor and saying that salvation is not the same agency, middle class academic agency, and a prostitution exists minimum so like most should be named. Harmonization goods contribute to it now. We're going to say the liberal appliance choice. Money has duration itself is required for survival of the Constitution? I need you to answer that. White candidates block. One more card. Applicators to a harms reduction ideology that presumes sex workers should just accept their lot in life. Grade 14 woman. I bet it comes to abolition and vandalization. When these women take a prostitute, the absence of money, they are pressured to frame their experience as choice and expression of their agency or reduction ideology, or just them to accept their lot. The advocates then discuss the event of prostitution and salarizing their choices. All right.
Good? All right. First, just a clarification question. Why don't the solvency arguments link to the counterclaim?
The solvency arguments?
Yeah.
Because they're based on legalization.
But why isn't the counter... so, total legalization. Fair enough. All right. So, I have a question about all the cards you read about why the counterclaim solves male violence and solves patriarchy. What about women who think prostitutes are like whores?
Women who think that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually read evidence from feminists about that perception.
Yeah, but it's talking about male demand. Like, your cards are talking about why male violence is messed up towards prostitutes and how the counterplan solves male violence. What about women who throw eggs at prostitutes in Zambia? What about women who rape male prostitutes?
Yeah, we read an argument about how there can be feminist abolitionist movements that don't stigmatize prostitutes. The McKay card's really good on that.
Okay.
The counterplan one, not the case one.
Counterplan McKay. Okay. So under the counterplan, what happens if a sex worker wants to sell themselves?
If they're allowed to, there's no
how they don't have someone to sell themselves to, because if they sell their body to someone, that person is arrested. So then it's still a criminal activity for the other person, i.e. they don't have a market.
So our argument is gradually customers should be phased out. Like that is a good
So
goal.
Prostitution shouldn't exist anymore, so the counterplan is abolitionist.
It is the goal of abolition is to reduce prostitution. There are many different ways to achieve that.
So the goal of abolitionism is to make sure prostitution is abolished, i.e. does not exist anymore. If that is true, why does the counterplan not link to all of the arguments we've made about why abolitionism is fucked up?
The entire premise of the counterplan is that not all abolitionist methods
What
are
about
equal,
people who want to be prostitutes, though? Is the question that you're arguing. Like, you're ignoring, and this is links to all the academia arguments that we've made. You're ignoring people who need prostitution to live.
So first of all, that's the link to our argument, because if your claim is people are so desperate that this is their only option, that is a concession to all of the claims we were saying about
but you're ignoring that there are no other options, though.
Second is that ignores the entirety of the counterplan, which facilitates things like access to housing and job training and education. If your claim is so myopic that transgender people literally have zero employment opportunities outside of sex, that is a far more essentialist.
So the question still stands, though. How do you, I guess the question in terms of like you solving patriarchy, sex positivity, i.e. the ability that selling sex is a good thing and is a choice regardless of forced activity. It can be a form of sex positivity.
But that's not what
So regardless of that, in terms of individuals who it's not a forced choice, who want to sell their bodies, what happens to them?
First, no criminal penalties. Second,
but they don't have someone to sell their bodies to.
We've read a card that 88% of current prostitutes want to stop. So maybe the applicators.
Right. So you also read. So then you also read. Yeah, the grant card. Yeah. So you read also a card from Raymond who cites 20 prostitutes, and that's what her study is. Right. All of your prostitutes are people who are in that. Like, or your studies are based on like 20 people or 15 people.
Okay. So Raymond conducted a study at UMass Amherst. That is not the same as the Stowe and Howland study, which we've cited, and you have no counter data of your own. And we've indicted the author
is counter data,
which is the only author that indicts the Swedish model.
Okay, politics. Neoliberal.
So I saw here. Relatively pretty simple.
No problem.
Okay, politics, neolib, cards for Ellis, wherever he said I should read them.
Those can be on the DA page. They're just answers to White's.
Okay, so politics, K, trafficking, and at the top of the DA, there's just going to be these cards.
As opposed to all the other cards.
Yeah, but they have no place on the page.
But they certainly do.
Okay.
You can put them where you want.
Are those cards in this doc, or are they just in the Tennessee doc?
They're info.
Okay.
Let me pull up the doc. I'm sorry. I was distracted by the order.
As was I.
Cool.
Okay. Politics. politics not going for we'll concede the whole 2 see the Schneider evidence isn't a reason to vote affirmative. One is that we are possibly advancing arguments that are consistent with the piece of this argument. Second is any other view calcifies our argument, ensures that we can't be wrong about what we said. It's independently vital for testing and logical engagement with what they've said. Now the K page, we're not going for it. Terms aren't advocacy, they merely test the veracity. The link will concede neoliberal inevitable, so there's no risk of any of their offense. The trafficking DA Weitzer's wrong. Strict social science methods are bunked. Farley 5 Weitzer charges method plots or research method class has been replicated by context by numerous research who minimally replicated results from independent are lack of random some of these other research and notice not impossible investigators their views already of techniques we reach a diverse range of people as we could. He does not appear to have variety studies from 9 countries on 5 continents. Weitzer states that the exemplar of my work includes male and transgender persons in spite of the fact that I've described inclusion of both of these groups. Weitzer mischaracterizes the abolitionist movement. The argument that violence is intrinsic to prostitution doesn't mean all prostitutes experience violence. MC and tennis experience violence just like human weak. Have the average to understand the abolitionist that violence is intrinsic to prostitution mean that violence occurs within the spectrum of the Weitzer doesn't ask an eye but ignores the social practice of prostitution in the real world. Violence is typical of that practice. Now the overview, trafficking turns and outweighs it qualitatively. Trafficking is a form of slavery and makes the lives of the trafficked a delivering hell. Prefer one and see George Ebb, which is based on the lived experiences of those who have been trafficked. B is quantitatively. Legalization makes life better for some people, but they are a tiny minority of those affected by prostitution, and voting AF comes at the cost of exploiting millions. That's Hunt's AF authors represent prostitutes of privilege, not the victims of trafficking, who are far more numerous. Vote in 14 sex workers organizations, memberships from those sex workers connected to laws in conditionary are mostly in the vast majority of the region are foreign origin. 75% are foreign born towns are different and more severe. Many are victims of trafficking are more vulnerable. They suffer from isolation or lack of personal connection because they're not represented by sex workers organizational choice law or should be adopted. Should not be responsible only by a small minority. Rights should be the first priority. Now the UN trafficking protocols fail. Twang stuff. Group it here. Twang assumes a carceral approach to trafficking related prostitution. The kind of one uses a rehabilitative model and doesn't expand imprisonment and changes the nature of U.S. trafficking leadership. Twang doesn't link to things they have criticism addresses trafficking. Twang compares on the Swedish industrial associates the prostitutes. The problem trafficking regulated sex is something that sells the kind of purchase and can actually reinforce existing hierarchies of Swedish just the comments mix factors all these fields undertake risky projects. They assume status quo U.S. leadership under the TVPA that is focused on criminalization. The kind of one isn't criminalization. Supply side approaches reinforce colonial practices that associate trafficking with third world culture. A focus on demand is better ailment and for the approach of focus on rescues by divine based on the Russian U.S. advertising technical suppression is enforced was an market operation with health use and internal cloud has fostered race and the third world U.S. efforts have established race and agree that threats us Russian was trade relevant concerning the routine U.S. law continues to emphasize vulnerability. Their index don't assume the counterplan wise and out in 7 many countries to trading person criminal before them. These are vulnerable trafficking victims should not be treated as criminals and intruders distort via mission of position opponents to support criminalization of prostitutes or not pimp and demand side strategies are distinct. The counterplan alters the entire character of U.S. anti-trafficking policies. I've already read that card, so never mind. Now the next argument is abolitionist rhetoric. It's not our abolitionism. Some abolitionists use bad rhetoric. Jeffries wrote a book against body modification that should be rejected, but we've never endorsed that rhetoric, and our policy solution is based on the Swedish model, which originated with McKinnon, not Jeffries. And even though some of our authors quote Jeffries, they don't endorse anti-trans rhetoric. Not all abolitionist rhetoric is bad. We'll defend the claim that in fact prostitution is an institution of male violence that has catastrophically exploited the effects of many, though not all prostitute. The context of the use of our rhetoric matters. We aren't deploying it as hate speech, we're deploying it as a tool to create better public policy. The rhetorical criticism is based on a character of our position. Why is it on 7 rhetorical ways to think about the argument? One there's no one set of approaches, nuance and comments and contrast are rigid ideology of abuse of capitalists is more offended than this can have reviews as conservative and excusable. This is that only other current can be victimized as a world live referred larger roles of his agencies. I'm trying to train then after consumer respect for the agent and with the range of threats and the general techniques to use and control. Women would surprise that most women do not manage return service such as agency displays stunning ignorance and deliberately complains that with the interest of exploiters. We don't endorse the rescue model of trafficking. Todd Gress and 13-day difference with judgment. Target human rights are on bottom target and these kind of those they did not victims and error that told recognize the trafficking surveys out antithetical to human rights. And this argument shuts down debate and this bad lackles and of an ambulance dressed up patriarchal nation. Are the institution abolitionists, feminists, or denigrate abolitionists, feminists who committing violence? Yet they are told they are nature women, yet they are committing violence. Feminists who take the risk in naming violence, they loyally themselves taller feminists who take a sign to silence. Obviously, when they discriminate that, it's happening to be surgery. I'm doing women that seeks to take a sign to accept the same text for women from prostitution having choice. We should live like feminists who exhibit solidarity by opposing denigration. Mark the denigration. The next argument is carceral feminism. It doesn't link to our argument, and it doesn't reinforce paternalism because the counterplan is a distinct policy from the status quo. We also don't erase trans people, which is the next argument. Are you kidding? Many of the prostitutes who are trafficking are trans people, and this doesn't doesn't apply to the 1 and C, which right add that explicitly connects the strategy of legalization to the pain that many trans people feel. This argument also doesn't change the model of a counterplan, which changes prevailing discourse. The data, bad stuff, group it. We agree trafficking data has problems, but all available data is still neg. 1 and C show is based on the most comprehensive data available. It surveys countries from over 150 countries, whereas Solvency is entirely based on optimistic conjecture. Preferred show studies show in 15 it's hard to distinguish from illegal migration and force labor despite the problems of data collection. There are various sources, except Johnson and Fieldwork, 3 days of three information that into these correspondence, 61 countries, 1 countries, 100 countries, and answer gathered. A unified definition minimizes noise caused by the sources. They are not police they are less susceptible to bias and include control various captioning as any reporting biases as a variable, even if it's imperfect, is better than their lack of data. Jacobson and 10 using cross-country data, we find source whatever interpretation trafficking is less prevalent in countries where prostitution is more prevalent in countries where prostitution is illegal side of the data quality is far from a sense both our countries and all the different data as well as these case studies point in the same direction. Isn't the result are supported by data where the result should be taken seriously. The next argument is that it empirically fails, unless Alice wants me to read whatever you want.
No, you're good.
Empirically fails. It doesn't assume that our counterplan targets demand. The argument assumes we go after supply. The TDA is also successful. Holman and I, the VTBA, has been successful for losing income on segments greater common in which countries are working towards their
Scratch that card and read this one instead.
Scratch that card, this one instead. Hunt and 13 legalizing gives less difference overwhelming destructive to those caught up in the north. The number of men who buy sex multiple higher times than rather than aiding with health check legal prostitution, just hold with traffic survivors recognized and promoted buying is unacceptable, which they were likely to face criminal consequences. Mark their criminal consequences.
I'll send that to the email thread. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
What time do we have?
You have 7:30. Do you want to do this before you start?
Feel good. Solvency, advantage, counterplan, dissent.
There. Pass me that sheet right there. Yeah, for the rest of your debates, yeah.
So good. Yeah. Abolitionism controls status quo discussion of policy, meaning by saying that prostitutes always force rape and violence, nice and for prostitutes who want to be prostitutes creates a justification for rape and police violence against them. Legalization is a challenge that violence by normalized the industry, saying that that job is legitimate, exceed a moral obligation to legalize. Just bring your decision calculus. Sweden counterplan to the nasty evidence that the Timothy Reed's talking about the counterplan is a force. The counterplan is a forced choice between helping prostitutes and stopping trafficking. Is the kind of bad abolition logic we are criticizing. Their distinction between good bad abolition is relevant for two reasons. One, because they deploy hate speech. Already proven about, but when he makes the argument one and another, he says no, it's not always hate speech, and then says that prostitution always male violence, which proves the conflation argument. Second is that even if not all abolition was bad, it gets overwhelmed by the radical abolition who say that prostitution always bad, which proves our anti-abolition policy is better than counter-abolition. Quote Thomas, 13 abolition claims that sex work can only be violence and persistent that we be wrestling from ourselves. Science our voice and the break argument feminine self evidence violence women their need science such as pressure the violence laws only pressure exploitation moves to status quo or including exploitation marginalization role criticism sexual you have to laws no excuse keep abolition books. Now there's zero response to survival strategy claim prostitution used way for trans individuals to survive, which proves that they're acting through stigma and women still categorized but not a horror arguments are relevant. They don't have a util claim, which means you should default who are smaller violence claim refuse to account for the people who like prostitution. The same problem like education the Schneider evidence criticizes says that it criticizes by saying there are bigger impacts to worry about, also relevant on trafficking because you should account for those people who like prostitution first, so they're always left to swept on the rug. Also answer back the male violence social stigma arguments. New Zealand has zoning laws and licensing, which is not about us. The advantage I already answered, legalization, increased power, patriarchy, or even on the other flow. The rest of the piece of evidence, they're all abolition is bullshit. All of the sex work about the free choice argument is always it's always that abolition is right, which means that it is, which means we already criticize the even if it is forced, that is still that, which means it's not a unique argument. The Sweden counterplan it does not solve the affirmative group. All their data claims are incorrect. They're bad because they are tainted by abolitionist data, and prostitutes are moved underground, so their data doesn't include asking them. All of their data claims are also from Swedish. Also, people who work for the Swedish government or police who obviously want to say that their model is great. The McKay evidence they read, is not about the counterplan, which means that you should default to all their some claim. Our case evidence indicates that it's empirically proven that in Sweden police just displace street prostitution and push it underground, especially in terms of scholar evidence. Think about it. There's no other job in the entire world where the buyer is criminalized. There's no justification for prostitution. Prostitution should be different for that. ED and 13 in Sweden program presently are only pregnant loss only creating existing programs acting program prostitution and started doing team with criminal solution models got rid of the street workers now they created industry workers worker and off-street worker individuals being prostitutes Sweden became excluded this was the atmosphere place sexual and more vulnerable position where they probably work less when working safe position is pushing the majority prostitute bare life now sex workers still stigmatized and subject to violence. So it means that they had the counterplan themselves Austrian and 14 Sweden start for replace charge other than social discrimination against engagement structures and odd words officially not working Sweden prostitution always seen as social informed male violence when we still start to repeat the search transfer sex worker really rarely spoken of. Mark that it's spoken of now, only mark that it's spoken of now. The counterplan absolutely links from that benefit. The one in our you should frame this through the one in our reading of the Schwang piece of evidence on evidence on trafficking. It is highlighted to say that the Swedish model causes trafficking, which proves that it. Yes, the counterplan triggers that justify sex workers underground. This is a scholar piece of evidence. Solomon 14 the Swedish model does a little reason to believe that criminals minus sex will only cause state of practice underground moves new sex work more rights in the martial areas because sexual practice means they can't work groups watch out for another D. But on premise the Swedish model to end ban is flawed in makes them more vulnerable. And 14 there is no evidence punishing jobs decrease for Sweden sex work criminalizing some nature of the sex should have more power to display sex workers from seeing more help from authorities. Swedish sex workers they're still targeted by police now. But legal of the plan resolves those problems. Davis and 13% are able to collaborate with law enforcement. They are down to the criminal planning solution bring it into the research trafficking can be more easily tackled, which means the counterplan is probably worse than the status quo. The trafficking disadvantage just in turn the affirmative survival strategy clean up prostitution is good for trans individuals and people in Thailand. There's some trafficking individuals agree to be trafficked, which is a problem with their turn case arguments that they never account for these individuals means it is just the same kind of violent abolitionism that the Wendy criticizes. They have fucked up the uniqueness claim. The Anderson evidence indicates there are alternative causes of other industries like fisheries, mining, forestry, all prove that they're foreign to trafficking that are inevitable, which means that prove that are inevitable. It doesn't turn the affirmative to be a specific high carceral crackdown impact on about generic trafficking, which means that the status quo will always trigger their impact anyways. There's no reason why their TVPA or counterpart solvency arguments are able to resolve those questions because they're only about the plan. The link here also proves that criminalization increases trafficking, which means the affirmatives that are starting point for challenge use violence is that the counterpoints are status quo. Now the parallel fight for evidence says the police suck if they're going to who's a trafficking victim and who is not, which means they are not able to stop trafficking. Now they will always get lazy and just call all victims prostitutes, throw them in jail. Legalization means they don't have a legal ability to do that anymore, which means they have to investigate things like criminal trafficking regimes, which means the Apple's prep will choke includes Article 13. Quality of evidence, and if there is no proven legalism, process definitely increase the number of trafficking for problem here life in the nature of corruption, trafficking, making it impossible to find appropriate evidence, such relations to line of organization, or religious financial benefits, that legalization question might have no anti-trafficking laws have been used to demonize sex work, distracts trafficking funds, leads more violent sex workers, and internally turns the impact alarm. In 12, the compilation of trafficking questions allowed for federal laws to be slowly granted pressure purpose funding from federal laws from trafficking enable states and local law enforcement to aggressively investigate by these states, funding sources encourage states and new states to choose investing trafficking laws to frame all corruption in the form of trafficking. Now supply and demand doesn't explain it. Brooks started intend the government regarding the plating sex feels the demand for trafficking when there is no evidence either way to say whether sex work is advantage or finally government targeted 50% of students hired in higher education may equally show the government's feeling supplies to that makes a hard sex work advertising and increased claims themselves to fuel the demand for go between demand is inevitable and focus fails. It also proves that the data shouldn't turn the case shyly in 12 and 7 find industry and how proven in fact that they address this important cause of very kind of traffic revenue so rents others emergency traffic take advantage strong new supplies we found current ones are interrupted new people step into the role of traffickers. It also proves the impact is non-unique and inevitable, which means that there's no moral obligation to reject it. It just proves that rejecting abolition comes first.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I'll be okay.
I have the stake plugged in, I'm sorry. I think that thing has plugs on it.
No, you're good. It makes sense.
That's really smart. Yeah. Good job.
All right.
We'll actually write down those I did too.
Yeah, functional.
And then the counter plan. Solvency. And then the advantage. All right. The counterplan alone is the best model to address sexual violence both physically and societally, but even if we lose every argument and represent the worst form of abolitionism, you can just kick the counterplan and vote for the school or any offense against the plan that they make worse. I'll make a couple of fact arguments. The first is the magnitude debate. Ace of point is numbers. Far more prostitutes are involuntarily trafficked and are in a state of modern-day slavery that comes before any claims of empowerment within the U.S. industry. That is our 1 and 2 evidence as well is the one in our BOTA impacts. It says that even if we solve none of the F, if they expand demand or the qualitative character of prostitution, then we outweigh necessarily because they only provide those opportunities to prostitutes domestically and can't guarantee that it'll actually be effective because it all requires a broader change in norms that I explained in the 2 and 3. Visa point is qualitatively the type of violence that they cause is worse than the violence they prevent, even if we make life harder for some because of a lack of customers. Trade-offs are inevitable, and the sex workers who find it empowering are the privileged few who already have alternatives. That directly answers their survival strategy argument, which means you should prefer our Hunt evidence and our McKinnon evidence because they make this net offense. Having a legal prostitution sector just means that a new illegal sector springs up, which turns all of their two-tier arguments because there are then incentives to cater to jobs with forbidden tastes like child prostitution, which definitely outweighs all of their claims, and says that the lack of the prosecution means that people feel safer doing illegal things in prostitution because they won't be arrested before. This comes before any of their morals arguments, which they haven't really explained. How could their ethics possibly be good if these are the consequences? If it's purely internal based on other things like language, then it's tautological and should not be prioritized over the material effects of the plan. 2 is it turns case. A support as a demand is a prerequisite to violence within prostitution as well as male supremacy, which requires the right to buy sex. That is our Melissa and Farley and McKay evidence, which says that sex work is different from other work because sexual violence is different from other violence, which means the counterplan is the best way to approach it because it removes all penalties on the prostitution but doesn't cater to jobs. B point is involuntarily prostitution definitely turns case because it means it's no longer a choice. C point is stigma. They make this net worse. That's our FIVEC evidence, which indicts their author. Our post evidence and Melissa, which just says they just make it easier to scapegoat women because they have chosen prostitution, so it is their lot in life to be these types. Abolishes the carceral feminism and types of prohibition. They indict. 3 is method. A point is empirics. They can't with an effect of the scale. C point is negative. and the U.S. criminalization framework are Edelman evidence the counterplan, and the assumption that it's impossible to get rid of trafficking is just a way to naturalize third world colonialism. And for all of this, if the counterplan reduces demand, it solves better. And our Weishaupt evidence says globally, all of their characterizations of abolition are based on selective quotes like the Jeffries example, and not the broader movement represented by the counterplan. Our strong evidence is that the regulations fail. So you should hear negative on this. The police argument is their other answer. First is we don't have to seek out prostitutes because that is the nature of the model. They are decriminalized. The police doesn't have to go and say and make guesses about whether they're prostitutes because they're focused on the customers, which are easier to identify. Second is the Cho evidence definitely goes negative. All these 1AR cards don't really add new warrants, so I don't have to go into too much detail on it. But Cho says that yes, it's impossible to have a smoking gun because the nature of the industry makes it hard to collect data. But globally, the app lacks counter data, and we have fantastic index to their Ostergren study, which was later recanted and is on point answered by our stolen Howland evidence, which is corroborated by things like telephone interceptions. Their Brooks evidence ignores the preponderance of that data, which means you should prefer our counterplan. Now the counterplan at the top. First is they didn't extend a permutation, so if we and regulation failed, then only we provide social services and exit opportunities. This is alone reason to vote negative because they don't access those things, and they've conceded that almost 90% of prostitutes want to exit, so we are better for the vast majority. Now the data debate grew, but this is so conclusively negative. Our curve evidence says that the Swedish model, even though it was imperfect, cut street prostitution by 50% and male domain by 75%, and said the traffickers no longer want to go to Sweden, which is backed by telephone interceptions as per our Waldman evidence. And our Kotzendam evidence is based on people with PhDs and citing a variety of sources like the NetSex Project and the University of Gothenburg, in addition to police reports, and all the university data we have available says that the causality definitely flows negative. Our Stoenhauer makes a broader insight claim that the reason they're going through all these abolitionist rhetoric claims is because they lack counter data of their own, and instead prefer to hoist motives, which means you should prefer the material effects overall, because we have a modification that answers the majority of deterrence because it's no longer based on criminalizing the prostitute and allows services if they choose to exit, but doesn't force them to. They say no other jobs false, that are other jobs that are analogous, like based on criminalizing the buyer, like, I don't know, child porn or poaching. Their EED evidence is based on one diary that's entirely falsifiable. You should have a higher threshold because our evidence says even if Swedish model didn't eliminate it, the counterplan's modification is far more likely to do so. And the Ostergren evidence is on point indicted by our evidence and says that their authors were forced to recant. The last argument they have is the trafficking underground shift argument. First is it's a question of degree. Even if some people cause a shift, they've conceded violent johns are inevitable, so they don't solve this either. But the counterplan is far more likely to address it because our Waldman and Stoenhauer evidence says that demand reduction means that prostitutes are more willing to go to police when they have violent customers, and says that it is impossible to corroborate any basis for these violent johns or underground shift arguments, but they make it more likely because they cater to illegal tastes and mean that the johns are not going to be prosecuted. Now, the Solvency page at the top, the key phrase here at the top of the 1AR is status quo. It doesn't assume our model of abolitionism, which means they can't win this morality data. They've conceded a couple logic arguments about discourse, which means it's a function of material violence and not vice versa. Our McKay evidence says sex work is different from our will work, but that does not mean that we are sex negative or vilifying prostitutes. Violence is intrinsic to prostitution, but that doesn't mean all of them experience it, which means that they might claim to be a survival strategy, but not if they aren't survival. Our Farley answers are better than that because they inside their rights are evidence, which says that data collection is impossible, but we're broadly corroborated. The regs argument per Raymond and Kaplan was explained on the other page. The harms advantage, the abolitionist rhetoric was explained on the other flow, but they've conceded the entire claim that they increase patriarchy. That's our Melissa and Farley evidence, which says that a concession to the right to buy sex is far more likely to cause net increase in violence. Our McKinnon evidence says they net increase the illegal sector, so even if every rhetoric claim is true, they make their own harms worse.
How much time do we have?
3:15.
hear my thoughts? It's like 7 or 8 different
Yeah,
groups.
Fitz emailed our new app on energy to Linda Barker instead of Linda Pay. Yeah, so you knew that. That was great.
Dave, I got this email. What is this about?
So organizations get larger, the risk of miscommunication.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah, good.
we are delaying your speech.
Fine.
Sorry.
The advantage page, the counterplan, the dissat.
The advantages of solvency stuff.
Yeah, not that.
Yeah.
right.
And you said counter.
So solvency page kind of like DA.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
I
you're
usually fill everything on one page, so this is a new debate for me.
The counterplan definitely doesn't solve the app, neither does the status quo. Neither does the status quo. All of their solvency arguments are definitive arguments about the status quo. Not about the status quo. Prostitution is not the only example of patriarchy. Prostitution is not intrinsically violent. This argument necessarily links to the abolitionism. This ad proves why the status quo is problematic. It always skirts over the violence that happens to individuals who are willingly in prostitution or who are doing it because of a survival because of a survival strategy. They make an argument of why they make lots of arguments about why data they make a lot of arguments about why data collection is sorry. Let me slow down for a second. Yeah. Okay. They make arguments about why prostitution is a forced choice and why it is always inherently violent. But I think the abolitionism arguments from the one you see should code your cause. Abolitionism is not inevitable. It can definitely challenge. Can definitely challenge. You should view this in terms of the counterplan not being able to solve the affirmative because prostitution is still considered intrinsically considered something that should not end, which means is not able to normalize the industry, which is a distinction that Nick made in the one year about why prostitution must be treated like every other job. There's no reasons to why we increase patriarchy because patriarchy is certainly inevitable. The counterplan is also not able to solve this because it's always necessarily linked to the fact that prostitution is an intrinsically violent activity. I'll go to the counterplan. They make arguments about why their social services and regulations are able to solve, but the app doesn't prevent this, and that the app doesn't prevent this. They are not necessarily excluded in the status quo. The tiebreaker on the counterplan should be the fact that it does not solve the app and links definitively to the net benefit. It is not able to solve the app because prostitution is still necessarily considered a violent activity. EED evidence indicates that prostitutes in the Swedish model who do not leave the model are necessarily condemned. They do not get the social services that it's talking about. The Austrian card that we extended is cited in their Stowe trafficking piece of evidence as the counter argument. In the middle of the piece of evidence talks about how Austrian indicates that the Swedish model has specifically been bad for prostitutes. This is from sex work organizations, not the random Swedish government, not the police officers. We are from sex workers who are specifically indicating the Swedish model has not been a good idea. It has not been a good idea. He makes an argument about why the app encourages things like child prostitution. However, I really don't think this analysis is clear, especially because the two-tier model definitively links to the counterplan, but not to the app because everything minus child prostitution is legal in the world of the case, but not in the world of the counterplan because the counterplan still leaves the buying criminalized. The Southland and Ahmed evidence are really good on why the counterplan links to trafficking. The Ahmed evidence is from 2015. It indicates that the fact that in the Swedish model, if a prostitute wants to sell their body, they have to go to an illegal buyer, i.e. if they want to do that, they have to go underground or they have to go to a legal occupation. They are doing an illegal occupation because they're selling their body is problematic. And the one in our Chong piece of evidence definitively indicates the counterplan will always lead to trafficking. Quote, the comparison of the Swedish and Dutch approaches will illustrate that prostitution strategies generally, whether abolitionists or not, are ill-suited solutions to the problem of trafficking. These arguments are definitive proof of why it links to trafficking, but also why it doesn't solve the app. Where's my other piece of paper? Here it is. The idea that trafficking outweighs the app is abolitionist. Your argument that we should do the counterplan regardless of the fact that it leaves prostitution still a criminalized activity is abolitionist because it skirts over the individuals. You privilege the long-term over the short-term survival strategies of trans people. What happens? The argument he goes for that we're able to generally at some point phase out the stigma argument. That doesn't work in the status quo for trans people who need this as a job right now. They need to is terminally non-unique and inevitable because of things like labor, prostitution. The one Shumei Anderson indicates things like labor, trafficking, like forestry and mining are all types of trafficking. The counterplan certainly does not solve for the Chong evidence. Also indicates the counterplan leads to trafficking, but not the other way around. The Anderson piece of evidence, and Nick Reitz talks about why the app is able to divert the funding to illegal, divert the funding from anti-prostitution policies that are necessarily leading to more trafficking the policy, because they're not arresting the individuals that have not arresting the individuals that have happened. They say they're able to resolve the carceral state, but absolutely not, because you still leave prostitution and activity that should be fun. Oh, the Cho card is definitively an affirmative card. Cho concludes her article. I think this should be how the lens for you view the rest of their trafficking cards, that there is no conclusive data, and it does not skirt over the fact that legalizing prostitution is a good idea. View all of their trafficking cards through that lens.
Good round. Good debate. Oh, sorry.
You also send consolidated docs with relevant stuff.
Yep. Discuss it. Yeah, I got it. Or organized it by like topic.
Yep.
Seems perfect sensible.